We could scout out the roots of the more unpleasant aspects of the human condition, of low mood, of self-hate, of depression, anxiety, of the hedonic curse, of the genetic foundations of misery itself. And if, for some reason, this all goes well, which there's no reason to suggest it has to, then you and I might be living in the last century in which anyone was ever involuntarily suffering, mentally speaking. Mental well-being is, I would argue, the most important factor in being alive, because it's the first thing that makes being alive worth being alive. Like, if you weren't conscious, nothing else would matter. And even if you lived in a solid gold mansion and slept on a bed made of Fabergé eggs and brushed your teeth with dollar bills, if you're miserable, you're still miserable. Gucci gang, Gucci gang. If there's a possibility of one day altering the human condition, perhaps the goal should be to preserve our humanity, but attempt to overthrow our evolutionary curses. For example, using these new technologies to raise an individual's baseline happiness default without compromising the individual's personality, much like the difference between you with a hangover and you after a workout. And, oh, is that Aldous Huxley at the door with some reasonable criticisms? No, he can sod off, thank you. This is wild speculation. Then again, some pain makes sense. If one is sat around eating crisps and gaming all day, it might be entirely appropriate to have that nagging feeling that time is being wasted, a form of deep evolutionary signaling to go out and actually engage with the human tribe. Or if you've lost someone close to you, you know that grieving is horrible, but it gives you time to try and make sense of who you've lost, and in the end, you can hopefully come to terms with it in a psychologically healthy way. There are plenty of sensible warning messages written into the human psyche, but others are overcompensations or just bad genetic luck. What the hell is the beneficial aspect of lifelong depression, for example? Oh, it's time for a disclaimer. There's a trend in media that I, and perhaps you, find a bit irritating, which is when someone will be pretending to be objective, but really just trying to beat some kind of pet theory of theirs into your head, labeling it philosophy or common sense or something, and using fancy big words. What comes next is purely my and a few other people's crackpot theory and speculation, and that's it. And real researchers with actual qualifications in the field of genetics who don't have enough time to make YouTube videos because they're actually busy doing something beneficial for humanity are rightly careful about speculation because the real world is really complicated, and they're frankly probably rightly fed up with champagne futurist types like myself making wild speculations about the future while facing no consequences for being wrong. There is no reason to think genetic engineering will be chocolate and cat cuddles. It could go badly in a million ways for a million reasons, and if you're using this channel for educational purposes in the first place, you have to be totally bonkers because it's just me, the cat, some cuddles with the cat, no qualifications whatsoever in genetics, purely speculation ahead. Alright? Alright. That being said, though, in the event that we do develop competency with these new genetic tools, the future of biology is going to be stranger than we're even capable of imagining. If genetic engineering becomes accessible to citizens, to us, what the hell happens then? Perhaps there'll come a whole new generation of artists who use technology as a brush and the human mind as their canvas, in which entirely novel degrees of bliss and well-being will be possible, and of course, new degrees of suffering and horror. We might isolate the molecular structure of bliss and proliferate it. We might isolate the molecular structure of misery and kill it. We may become capable of experiencing emotions we don't even have words for yet. Degrees of euphoria light years beyond anything drugs can provide today. We know from psychedelics and sleep that the human mind is capable of entering alien dreamtime spaces, spaces unconstrained by our usual evolutionary baseline architecture. Tomorrow's genetic explorers may go in search of these spaces, rewiring the perceptual and reward centers of their brains. If that happens, it will seem bizarre to them that for the whole of our history, we occupied only the ground floor of human experience, and except for the occasional hallucinogenic dabbling, never took the elevator up or down to those other strange floors, to boundless optimism, to entire lifetimes free of self-loathing or anxiety, ignorant of the molecular and genetic foundations of misery, much in the fashion that disease was once thought caused by bad smells. Back when we lived in an era in which we had more control over the atom than we had over our own internal circuitry, that somehow we survived the psychochemical dark ages. Will we lose ourselves to radical transformation? Will we venture too far into the experimental forest? A world in which we fracture into so many variations of humanity we can no longer communicate with each other. A world in which one can make a living scouting out these new, strange humans, much as an anthropologist seeks out new cultures today. We have no idea. We are a limited species who may be about to gain unlimited power. And what happens then? What becomes of the human condition when the genetic shackles have been taken off? There will be plenty of moral problems of technology for our children's children to face, but one of them is bound to be the issue of human modification, and by extension, modification of the human condition. And we currently have no compass to show us the way as we set out on this new, very possibly perilous expedition into our own source code. as John says in Brave New World. But I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin. And why should we edit out the strange edges of the human condition? There is a difference between eccentricity and suffering at the hands of a mental legacy we inherited from nature. We still bear the evolutionary scars of our rise through the ranks of the animals, of our helpless infancy in the ocean, and then of our traumatic childhood on the savanna plains of Africa. And as a result of those millions of years of ruthless evolutionary pressure, we have matured into a very peculiar mix of aggression and diplomacy, willful ignorance and curiosity, chaos and smarts. We have enough problems today as it is. Just considering disease and mortality, gastroenteritis alone kills about 1.8 million kids a year. And that's to say nothing of cancer, malaria and tuberculosis. But slowly, thanks to the conscientious among us, they are on the run. And it is conceivable that one day humans will live on a planet free of disease and free of premature death at the hands of nature. And as we relegate these demons to history, we will surely pause to cast an eye on those involuntary mental maladies as well. The spectres of despair, of depression, of anxiety, and wonder if we might banish those too. Was must be the most lovely word in the English language. It tells you everything you need to know about our ingenuity and compassion as a species. If you look up smallpox today, often the first two words of the definition will read smallpox was. If everything goes well as we mature as a species, the word was will propagate steadily throughout our encyclopedias, and perhaps centuries from today, some future child will stumble on some future incarnation of Wikipedia and come upon obscure and forgotten diseases and afflictions of the human being, couched again and again, relentlessly, in the wonderful past tense. Cancer was a group of diseases involving abnormal cell growth with the potential to invade or spread to other parts of the body. These contrasted with benign tumors. Malaria was a mosquito-borne infectious disease affecting humans and other animals, caused by single-celled microorganisms. Belonging Alzheimer's disease was a chronic neurodegenerative disease that usually started slowly and gradually worsened. It was a highly contagious infectious disease caused by the measles. Huntington's disease was an inherited disorder that resulted in the death. Tuberculosis was an infectious disease usually caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis bacteria. Misery was an involuntary state of mental distress common to humans of all eras and circumstances. Its eradication marked the beginning of the banishment of the existential horrors from the human condition.